Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio, the podcast where pop culture junkies discuss popular and sometimes not so popular culture. My name is Moss, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
I'm really glad we abandoned the subtitle of my host name.
Which is a reference to our first podcast, Which is Worse.
Right, which
is no longer
a wonderful segue into the topic of today.
Right.
Which is really biased and pompous of us to assume that we have a fan base.
We're back for episode number 2. We didn't die.
Nope.
Yay.
What is the usual trope for returns?
Strikes again.
Strikes again is a good one.
Strikes back.
Yeah. Attack of the...
Return of the...
Temple of... These are all second movies.
Temple of Pants.
Temple of... Yes, it would probably be a little bit more interesting.
So this week, Eric and I are going to be discussing nostalgia and fan service. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing?
Or is it both?
Or is it neither? Over the last several years, and really throughout the last, couple decades, I guess, in film and television show, there's been a real focus on adapting maybe older franchises, a la, 80s cartoons or
Right.
children's television shows. A big focus on adapting those franchises into feature films or reboots or new TV shows, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's become really apparent within the past, I would even say within the past 6 or 7 years, it's gotten really bad.
For sure. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, just kind of nostalgia and fan service. What are the positives? What are the negatives? What are some examples from recent times that we have an opinion about?
Positive or negative? It's mostly negative.
So, Eric, why don't you take it away?
Okay, so this past week we just got the new Ghostbusters. Is it just Ghostbusters?
Yeah, it's just Ghostbusters.
Okay.
They're doing a new Ghostbusters movie.
Right, it's not a reboot, it's a...
But it's not a sequel either. It is
technically a sequel. It's like...
I think it's a reboot. Because I know that in the trailer they say like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there was press releases saying that this was not a sequel.
But everyone's back.
Yeah, but I don't think they play the same characters.
Okay,
I think there's going to be...
That's worse.
There's going to be cameos.
What is it going to be like? Dan Aykroyd's going to be like, wow, that's a great laser gun.
Buy my vodka.
But Laura's like, I didn't want to do this.
So we got the new trailer, and the internet is kind of aflame right now.
Yeah, and so we got to put something aside because there is a large group of people that are aflame at the wrong reason.
I agree.
The fact that there is an all-female cast is not the reason why it looks bad to either of us.
Right. So neither one of us, like, all-female cast, that's fine. Like, whether it was a male cast or a female cast, that doesn't matter.
Right.
The fact of the matter is the trailer, and I'm not saying that the movie will be terrible.
The trailer just did no service.
The trailer is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, it's very poorly cut together, and...
There's even a fan cut.
Yeah.
Which it's cut more a la the original Ghostbusters trailer.
Yeah.
And it looks a lot better.
Yeah, there's a new cut trailer where like somebody basically took the footage and the music and cut it down. It's only like maybe 45 seconds long, something like that.
It's barely a minute.
They cut out like the expositional dialogue and it makes it look way better.
Yeah. So, don't get me wrong. I actually, when they announced the casting, I actually got really excited because I am a pretty big fan of Kate McKinnon and Kristen Wiig.
Definitely.
Melissa McCarthy, I can take or leave her. I cannot stand Leslie Jones. I think she's horrible. I think her main comedy is one note, and it's not a funny note at that.
Yeah, I'm I haven't watched a lot of Saturday Night Live recently, but just from what I've heard, and obviously take everything with a grain of salt, but just what we are presented with in the trailer, especially towards the end of the trailer, where the power of pain compels you, and she's slapping Melissa McCartney, like that's just not funny.
No. And that's her comedy. Her comedy is, I'm gonna yell.
Right. It seems like it's a lot of yelling.
Yeah. So
I've heard, like, I've been listening to other podcasts and like reading about it. Supposedly her role in the movie is she's going to be like a New York historian.
Yeah, she's like familiar with the streets.
I know
like her big thing. Apparently.
I know they say that in the trailer, but I've heard that she's actually like a historian. Like she knows.
But they have like a subway booth.
Right. Well, as opposed to, and that's why I think it's just a poorly cut together trailer is because I think the trailer goes out of its way to give us a lot of exposition on who the other three characters are. Like clearly they're like, scientists type.
There are Egon, Murray, and Aykroyd.
Yeah, the mixing up the actors and the characters' names exactly.
I can never remember his name.
It's Egon Spengler.
I mean the actor's name.
Oh, Harold Ramis.
Yes, I never remember Ramis.
Rest in peace.
Yes.
So it's definitely taking like the archetypes of the original 4 Ghostbusters,
right,
and kind of switching them around. Which that's fine. I'm not super like I don't want the exact same movie over again. Like I don't think that's very interesting, and that's something else I'm sure that we'll get in and talk about here in a few minutes.
Right.
But it seems like the jokes just aren't funny in the trailer, in my opinion. I do like the part where they're both like, "Let's go." Oh, do you want to like? I kind of chuckled at that part, but overall, it's just not funny.
Yeah, and I think the part that I liked from it was because I like Kate McKinnon. I think she has great comedic timing. I did kind of like where she tries to freak out Kristen Wiig. Like I thought that was okay.
Very, very young Frankenstein.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I liked about it, because I was really worried initially going into this that we were just going to get, this is the new Bill Murray, this is the new Dan Aykroyd,
right?
And it doesn't feel like that. Like Kate McKinnon is clearly supposed to be the new Egon, but she's like different in a way. Kristen Wiig's clearly supposed to be Aykroyd, like the more forward-pushing person.
Right.
Different, though. Like, they're all different enough.
Yeah, and I think, I don't so much mind the personalities. Like, I think that's fine. The trailer simultaneously gives too much away.
Right.
And doesn't give us enough. Like, if the whole Leslie Jones thing, like, if what we've heard is true and she's supposed to be, like, this New York historian type character, we don't get any of that.
Right.
In contrast, we get a lot about the other 3 characters, and it seems like Leslie Jones's character in this movie is just going to be very one note. I mean, just I hate to say it, but just like kind of stereotypical big, loud black lady.
Yeah.
And
which to be fair, that's the comedy she shoots for a lot of times in SNL.
All right, and I mean, I guess that's not the end of the world, but I'm all down for the whole female cast. Like, I think, again, I don't think the casting is an issue whatsoever. There's a lot of hate on the internet right now about, it's an all-female cast. You're ruining my childhood, blah, blah, blah. Right. I don't agree with any of that at all. It seems like we're definitely getting a little bit of a feminist vibe from the movie, which I think is good. Like, that's positive. But it's kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back with the Leslie Jones character. And again, I'm not super familiar with her comedy, but based upon what you said and from what I've heard, that's kind of what it is. And then we get things like we get the exposition where Melissa McCartney's like, oh, now the ghost can go inside and take over people. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of a big twist that you don't need to just give away in the trailer.
That's the big comedy scene. The big comedy scene is going to be like wow, you're acting weird.
Yeah, we're just kind of given we're kind of handed the plot of the movie, and it's just
obnoxious.
Right. And it's just, I don't know.
So that's kind of our opinion on the trailer, but the trailer has also, to me, it's really sparked another problem. And that is not anything to do with the trailer, but with people's reaction to the trailer.
Absolutely.
And I'm not going to go to the whole misogynist side of it. I'm going to go into the side of you ruined my childhood. You've destroyed the sanctity of the Ghostbusters trademark. Its golden, blessing is destroyed now. It's forever tainted.
Right. Something that we've been hearing a lot lately, especially with these nostalgia franchises. Yeah.
It's Ghostbusters. It's a good movie.
Right.
It's not Citizen Kane.
Right. And I even like the second one. Not everybody does.
I don't like the second one.
I enjoy the second one.
I also didn't like the animated series, but I really liked the first one.
And so this is a point to plug a podcast that's way more popular than ours, or much well known, that's for sure. The Weekly Planet with James and Nick Mason, internet celebrity Nick Mason.
Yep.
He basically has many, many times before talked about how, look, if they release a new version of Ghostbusters or whatever, like any franchise, if they release a new one and you don't like it, you can just ignore it.
And you can go back to the other one.
Right. It doesn't take away the old ones. Now, there are definitely times I feel like where there are sequels and franchises or that sort of thing that detract from the value of the franchise, specifically with direct sequels and that sort of thing.
Or a good example is a film that just came out, Zoolander 2. Zoolander 2 is terrible.
I didn't see it.
That movie is not funny. It's not original. It's super short, and it's like all cameos, and that's the comedy of it.
Well, and I think the big example that I always think of is The Matrix. Like, obviously,
Yes.
the original Matrix is a great film. It's very groundbreaking. It did a lot of, introduced a lot of new techniques and things that are still being used today. The second one and the third one are pretty trash.
Oh yeah.
And that because they all tell one kind of continuous story, it really kind of bogs that down to another extreme example, the Star Wars prequels.
Yeah.
Obviously, the original trilogy is the original trilogy, and the prequels are what they are, but just by association, everything's just kind of weighed down. But in general, the point is that if this new Ghostbusters movie comes out and you don't like it, or it's not funny, or you hate it for whatever reason,
just go watch the other one.
It's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to buy it on Blu-ray.
Right.
You go see it, you block. I mean, look, there's so many movies that are remade that like they come out and nobody sees them and they go off into obscurity.
Yeah, for sure.
And nobody cares anymore. Like a lot of people didn't like Men in Black 3. I thought it was okay, but have you heard anything about Men in Black 3 anymore?
Right.
Like no one cares anymore. It's gone. Poof. But the biggest thing, like what you were saying, the original's not going to go away. George Lucas took away the original versions of 4, 5, and 6.
This is very true.
No one is going to take away the original Ghostbusters.
Hopefully.
No one's going to like digitally put Kristen Wiig into a scene with Bill Murray and Sigourney Weaver just to go, wow, that's weird. It's not going to happen. You're fine.
There's a time travel plot a la Terminator Genisys where they go back into the original movie.
No.
Coming in 2019.
Terminator Genisys 2.
Ghostbusters, Genesis Busters. They just go around and break Sega consoles. Yeah, I did. It was terrible.
It was horrible. It made no sense.
It was real bad.
That movie uses nostalgia like a freaking crutch. Like it relies so much on it that it's when the trailers rely on it.
It's like Darth Vader. It's more nostalgia now than man.
Yes, thank you, Ben Kenobi.
You're welcome.
But like I remember when the first trailer came out, and in the first trailer, not only do they use the, "Come with me if you want to live," but they also use the "I'll be back" line, and it's like,
yeah,
stop.
I mean that's kind of a staple of all of the movies. But I agree. I feel like this Genesis in particular, the entire plot revolves around the events that happen in the first movie and the second movie, kind of.
Right.
We recycle the liquid Terminators from Terminator 2.
But we sucked out all the intimidation of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like
the reason why Terminator 2 works so well and the T-1000 works so well in it is legitimately a more intimidating figure.
Right. It's relentless. Like it's unstoppable.
Right. And it seems to be smarter than the first one.
I agree.
Like it's able to mimic people. It's able to think out things. Like it immediately knows, hey, if I'm going to go after a kid, I need to be someone that, talking to a kid's not going to look weird. I'm going to be a cop. Like,
yeah,
it's smart. It's thinking.
And it can like sense, the environment around it and adapt accordingly and like learn information based on the environment.
Right. It doesn't stand out like an Austrian bodybuilder walking around town in leather.
Yeah. So in Genesis, they recreate the opening scene from the first movie where the two Arnolds fight.
Right.
Which I actually, that part I thought was kind of cool. Like I like the idea of a time travel story where they go back into the events of the previous movies.
Sure.
Like I think that's kind of interesting. But
when executed correctly.
Right, which obviously it's not here. But they rely on the entirety, like as you said, the entire film is being propped up on the crutch that is the first two movies.
Right.
Because they essentially ignore 3.
Which is probably a good idea.
For the better, I guess.
Yes.
I haven't seen 3 in forever.
There's no talk to the hand scenes. So, one of the weirdest moments in the movie is when they're sending Kyle back in time. It's like slowly panning through the group, and it stops on Matt Smith. And we're all supposed to go, oh, it's Doctor Who. It's the second Doctor. I know it's not the second Doctor. And it holds on him. And he does nothing. And, the music swells, and then it cuts away.
Right. It's this total fan service moment where it's like, oh, this movie's about time travel, and we got the Doctor in this movie. Get it?
Right.
Elbow. I
was waiting for, another guy to turn around and be like, oh, he's time traveled. And
right.
It's David Tennant.
And that doesn't go anywhere.
No, it's
totally
it's
pointless.
In the next movie, as they said.
That doesn't serve the story at all. Like, it doesn't go anywhere. There's no purpose to it. It's just, hey, look, it's Matt Smith. Isn't that funny?
Wasn't he in a show once? I don't know. Do you know? Who cares?
And that's it.
Yep. This movie has time travel. Another funny thing that kind of stuck out to me is the whole one-up thing that they do, because they couldn't talk about the T-1000, and they couldn't have the T-1000 be like the big threat, so they had to one-up it. I don't know if you've ever been to Universal Studios, but in Universal Studios they still have a stage show for Terminator 2.
Nice.
And it's legit, and like there's like actors come out with like that shotgun that he like shoots and flips and shoots, and it's ridiculously cool. But he goes in the future with John Connor in this. And they're like, oh my god, look out, it's the T-1000! And it's a giant robot spider.
It sounds terrible.
And like that's immediately what I thought about when John Connor's like, now I'm a Terminator.
Yeah, they make him into like the nanotech.
Like which it's a nano machine Terminator right after we just had Transformers go to nano machine Transformers.
Sure. I mean, they were probably in development at the same time. It's a terrible idea,
They're both
but
garbage.
they came to it independently.
Yeah. Why would you rip off Transformers?
But yeah, they couldn't really come up with an idea that's, and it's kind of to the Terminator 2's credit to where the T-1000, like we were talking about, is such a menacing, like relentless threat. Like it's an iconic movie villain. And so in this movie, they couldn't really think of anything to get past that. It's the same kind of problem that Terminator 3 had. And so they were just like, well, now we'll make John Connor the bad guy.
Because that's a clever twist, right?
And then he won't kill his mother and Kyle Reese. He's like, you can join me. And they're like, no. And he's like, okay, now I'll kill you. Even though he could have just killed them. Like, it's so stupid. He's like working with Skynet because reasons. And then they talk about how, when Sarah Connor was a little girl, there was a Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, like the T-800, the Arnold, that comes back and protects her.
The Arnold.
And then Jai Courtney asks, who sent you or who sent that one? He's like, it's classified. We didn't bother to write. Like, the movie story is such garbage.
Right.
The entire movie, they didn't have a single original thought, and they're just the whole time elbowing you like, hey, remember those other movies? Weren't they really good?
Well, and like 50% of the story feels like on-disc DLC, where it's like, hey, pay an extra $10 in a year and you can figure out who did send Arnold back. What is going to happen to John Connor? What was Matt Smith doing there? Like, no. Make a movie. Don't make an 2-hour long trailer.
Right, the movie just doesn't go anywhere, and I think Genisys is a really good example of how over-reliance on previous films in the franchise without really bringing anything new to the story or anything new to the mythos really weighs that film down.
Yeah, they just hope that, hey, it's another Terminator film, we'll all love it.
Right, it's brand recognition as opposed to original story or original plot or original ideas or anything.
Like Fury Road.
Completely unlike Mad Max Fury Road.
Which came out pretty close together. It was a good side-by-side comparison where it was like, this is how you don't do it, this is how you do it.
Right. And Mad Max is a really great example of how you can take an existing idea or an existing property and take the elements that work and fuse them into original ideas and original storytelling, original, visuals, that sort of thing.
Right.
And craft a masterwork of visual film, visual storytelling.
Yeah, and one of the really good ways that they show a kind of a fan service thing is just the inclusion of the villain being Immortan Joe, who is technically the villain in a previous film.
Right. So they reuse the same actor, and it's not made clear whether it's the same character. Like, I would assume that it's not. I've always viewed.
And see, I kind of assumed it was because he's horribly injured in the end of I think, what was that, Mad Max?
This is the first one.
Yeah, he's horribly injured in that.
That's a good point.
He's like clearly on a lot of life support.
And that's kind of cool because it's left open for interpretation. But the fact that they use the same actor doesn't like overbear the movie at hand.
Yeah, there's no time where Max looks at him and goes, "You're the guy from the first movie."
Right.
There's none of that garbage.
Because I've always looked at the Mad Max movies as kind of like separate stories that are like legends about this character who roams the waste, and like who's to say that any of them are particularly true or particularly not true. Kind of like the way the Legend of Zelda should be, as opposed to this giant mess of a timeline that doesn't make any sense. But that's what's cool about it is that, yeah, you could interpret it as, hey, it is the same guy. And because they've used the same actor, they've left that open to you to kind of decide for yourself. But that them using the same actor doesn't like shackle you to a particular interpretation.
And you don't have to go back and watch Mad Max to figure out, like, where did Immortan Joe come from? Why is he like this? Like, you don't have to watch that. The movie does a good enough job in setting up, this is the villain, this is why we hate him, period. Done.
Exactly. And the fact that they use that actor doesn't detract from the story that they're actively telling.
It's like a bonus.
Yeah, like even if you didn't know that was the same actor, doesn't matter.
Right.
Completely unlike the whole Spectre and
Blofeld.
Thank you. Completely unlike the whole Spectre Blofeld.
Not Blofeld. Remember,
right.
It's definitely not Blofeld.
Completely the opposite of that, which we'll get into.
So recently I've been kind of looking into this kind of situation because it is said very frequently now. Anytime Hollywood announces anything, there's always this big hoopla over, oh, they're destroying everything, they're ruining the childhoods, all that kind of stuff. But to be honest, the reason why they do this is because websites like BuzzFeed and these other list websites do like the top 10 90s things that only 90s kids will remember.
They're extreme.
Right. Rocket power. You know?
Capri Sun.
And it's just like, then everyone looks in this article, everyone comments on it, everyone likes it, reposts it, everything like that. So Hollywood sees that as, this is big, this is stuff that people like or stuff that people miss.
Right.
Let's make a movie out of it for the people.
Right. There's an audience. There's money to be made. Let's do this thing.
Like, so a big example of a Hollywood film that comes out based on an old property where everyone is all of a sudden the biggest fan of ever, and I grew up with it even though I was born 10 years after it came out, and I watched it with my grandpa. Like, everyone came out of the woodworks and was like, I was a big fan of the show, they're ruining it. Gem and the Holograms. It was out for like a month. Now,
I have no idea what that is.
It's a feature.
Are you about to enlighten me?
I am. So, Gem, originally titled, came out in 1985. It ran for 3 years. It is listed as an animation adventure drama. Has 65 episodes of greatness. Jerrica Benton is secretly the leader of the glamorous and exciting music group Gem and the Holograms. I also believe there's spy stuff involved. No one watched this show. So clearly no one knows what this show is. But when the movie was announced and when the first trailer hit back in like May of last year, like everyone was coming out of the woodworks and talking about how they loved this and it was their favorite show growing up and how dare you do this. This can't possibly be true because so many people talking about this never mentioned anything about it before. It's just now that it's ruining stuff. And it clearly isn't. So it's this idea that when Hollywood remakes something, and if it just doesn't look good, instead of just taking it as, well, it's a misstep, it's the end of the goddamn world for these super Gem fans, because you totally watched Gem.
All right. You've educated me. So anyway, something that people might be a little bit more familiar with. What I want to talk about today is Street Sharks. Jawsome! What I want to talk about today is James Bond, specifically the Daniel Craig James Bond movies.
Oh, the Timothy Dalton years.
Hey man, I love Timothy Dalton.
I do, those are great. He's a more violent Bond.
And specifically how the movies kind of originally established this kind of maybe darker, grittier, more realistic tone. And I don't like the idea that everything has to be darker and grittier these days. Like, I'm not a fan of that at all.
Right.
But I think that Casino Royale set a precedence that more films could follow in the franchise.
Right. Yeah, it does. It sets like a tone and like a bar level of what to expect.
Definitely. So like in Casino Royale specifically, we have a James Bond who is an alcoholic.
Yep.
who is kind of a sociopath.
Yep.
And who's a little disturbed.
Check.
But it's great.
And he can do parkour.
Man, what a guy.
That guy shouldn't have taken his phone out.
And so we get this version of James Bond that is not all together. He's not the, ding, 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 adjusting his tie while the tank's going through, the bridge, which I like that in GoldenEye. But we're getting a more grounded, three-dimensional character who just happens to be James Bond.
Yeah, I mean, you could even break it down to every James Bond film has the part where he walks down the hallway, turns and shoots from the hip, and it's like classic James Bond, shoot from the hip. In this one, he's freaking drowning a guy in a bathroom, like a dirty truck stop bathroom sink.
Yes.
And it's 100% this is the tone.
Right, it's fantastic. From the very beginning, we get this black and white scene where it's intercutting between James Bond in an office with this guy who we discover is a traitor, and they're talking about, you have to have 2 kills to become a 00 agent.
Right.
With an intercut with the bathroom scene that you were just describing, where it's very visceral and it's very intense.
And you feel the weight behind everything.
Absolutely. When he slams him into the sink, when he's drowning him in the sink and holding him down, you see the expression on Daniel Craig's face and you're like, shit, this is intense.
Yeah.
And then you get the bullet scene where he grabs the gun and shoots the guy, just like you described. And from the very, very get-go, like you said, this is a different James Bond. This is, we're going for something different here. Down to the Chris Cornell song. The whole idea, the name of the song is "You Know My Name." The idea is that the name James Bond, but this is different.
Not James Bond anymore.
Exactly. This is a different story that we're telling. I really, really like that. I think Casino Royale is one of the best action movies, certainly within the last decade, 20 years, possibly even of all time. It's my favorite James Bond movie.
Right. It's mine too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic. And I love Connery, but Casino Royale is just on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie. It's not only a good James Bond movie, it's just a great movie.
Yeah, it kind of tops most spy films even. Yeah,
absolutely. And which is a shame because as they go along, that doesn't become the case anymore.
Yep.
So we get the first movie, we get Casino Royale. Again, he's introduced to Vesper Lynn, he falls in love with her, she gets killed. There's this plot where, this is all spoilers by the way, where she has to betray him because this organization has kidnapped her husband or boyfriend or whatever.
Right.
And it's just this really, and the villain in the movie, he's not like this, I'm going to take over the world.
Played by Mads
Mikkelsen.
Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
I never remember his last name.
Fantastic. He played a Hannibal in the television show.
Amazing.
Which I've heard is great, but I've never seen.
I've also heard same things. Also have never seen.
Okay, we'll have to catch up on that. But anyway, his villain his character, he's borrowed money from this organization, then he has to pay it back because he bets big on the stock prices on that new model plane at the airport,
right?
Which they're supposed to destroy to drive the stock prices one way, and James Bond interferes. The plane doesn't get destroyed, and so the villain, what's his name in the movie, Le Chiffre.
Yeah,
Le Chiffre, he gets screwed over because the plane didn't go the way he wanted it to go. So he's kind of he's in a desperate situation where he has to organize the poker game to make money to pay back the organization. So the plot is, the villain has this plan of, we're going to basically sway the stock market to our favor, and I'm going to make a bunch of money. That plan doesn't work, so he has to get more money to pay back this organization.
Right.
It's a great plot. It's a little complicated, but it's not, when you watch the movie, you can kind of pick up on what's going on. And it's not the villains taking over the world or anything along those lines. Great movie. Then we move on to Quantum of Solace. Almost everybody dislikes this movie.
Right, which we've talked about this in the past. It does miss its mark as opposed to Casino Royale.
Oh, I agree.
However, the villain's plot and the villain's goal and idea is so hauntingly real.
Yes. So you and I both like Quantum of Solace.
Yes.
I think it's actually a good movie. It's not nearly as good as Casino Royale.
I think that's kind of the reason why it gets such a negative reception.
Yeah,
it followed up after Casino Royale.
I think that's a big part of it. And it's not a great movie. And they had to finish up writing it during the writer's strike at that time. So, everything wasn't completely fleshed out. And again, I don't think it's a perfect movie, but I really, really enjoy it. And like you were talking about, the villain's plot in the movie is fantastic. So basically, the villain is Dominic Green,
Right.
and he is attempting to buy up land where there is a lot of water.
Yeah.
The idea is that
And they're in Africa.
they're in it's not Africa. It's I want to say it's Bolivia. It's like South America. Anyway, it's not super important, but the idea is that the villain is buying up all this land because that's where the water is.
Right.
At first, you kind of think maybe he's buying up the land for oil, but everybody keeps saying like, "Oh, there's no oil there." You know, people have tried in the past. There's no oil there, and then it's revealed towards the end of the movie that he's buying up this land where all the water is because he's attempting to.
He's going to privatize water.
Exactly. Like instead of the water supply being controlled by the nation, by the government, it's going to be privatized, which allows him, and by extension the organization he works for, Quantum, to directly control the water supply of this nation. And they're trying to do this around the world.
Right.
You hear them talking in their meetings about how we're buying up the most precious resource. And again, you keep thinking, oh, it's oil. Oh, it's oil. They even like drown the one girl in oil and leave her in the bed, very reminiscent of Goldfinger.
Yeah.
And so again, you're led to believe like it's oil, but it's water. Like that's a fantastic idea. Like that could really happen.
And it's a really cool twist because so many times a goal is oil.
Right.
And for this twist is just, no, the goal is something that you and I can go upstairs and grab at any moment.
Right.
But some countries can't.
Right. So it's Dominic Green and by extension Quantum supporting this regime change in this third world country so they can install somebody who will sell them this land that has the water in it to privatize the water supply. And when this is revealed to like the colonel or general or whoever he is, he's like, no, I'm not going to do this. And Dominic Green's like, well, if you don't sign it, then we'll just kill you and put in somebody who will. Yeah. And he reluctantly signs it. Like, it's a fantastic plot for a villain.
Yeah.
I love it. So again, two movies that are fairly grounded with real world situations. You know, it's an action movie, but fairly realistic situations.
It doesn't feel stretched.
Right. There's not a lot of things that are super over the top. And again, Quantum carries over this tone where James Bond, you know, he's an alcoholic and he's depressed after Vesper's death and he still doesn't trust people. It's fantastic. We get the scenes with Mathis, the guy who he thought was the traitor in the first movie. Mm-hmm. He ends up working with in the second movie, who then subsequently gets killed. Daniel Craig's Bond kind of has this realization that he's partially and almost fully responsible for Mathis dying.
Right.
He's put him into the situation where this happens. It gives Bond a lot of opportunity to develop as a three-dimensional person, not just as this super secret agent, you know, handsome guy who's betting all these women, which he's still doing, but you get a sense of, you know, like there's that scene where he's at the airport and MI6 like shuts down his funding. And he's like, he's talking to the lady at the airport and he's like, there's going to be some people calling for me. If you could tell them that I went to Beijing or wherever, and he's going to somewhere completely different.
Right.
You get to see the charm, like the woman kind of smiles and she's like, oh, I'd be happy to. You get that, but then you get the moments of where he's on the plane and he's drinking and Mathis is like, you should get some sleep. And he's like, I can't sleep anymore. And he goes, what are you drinking? And he's like, oh, it's this martini. And the bartender's like, it's this, 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 and this. He's had 6 of them. You get the idea that this guy he's damaged.
Yeah.
Like, he has problems.
Which is kind of cool because all the other Bonds we've seen are, you know, Bonds in their prime.
Yeah.
Like, they're at the top of the game. This feels like a Bond who...
It's the beginning of his career. Like, Casino Royale is his, like, first mission. So,
right.
But we get the idea that he's not perfect.
No.
Like, he does make mistakes. He's human. He's good at what he does, but he's not perfect.
Right.
So I love those two movies, like Casino and Quantum. Love both of them. Obviously, again, Casino, the superior film, but I still like Quantum you and I both like Quantum where most people don't.
Right.
Okay, then we get Skyfall.
And a bit of a disclaimer with Skyfall, a lot of things we're going to talk about. Skyfall was the 50th anniversary of Bond, and they felt obligated to celebrate that in Skyfall.
Right. The big thing that happens in Skyfall is the tone of the movie greatly shifts back to
It's an action film.
it's kind of like a classic Bond movie.
Right. There's explosions. There's mass destruction in certain areas.
Yeah. And like there's explosions and things in the first two movies, but specifically, when the Aston Martin comes out and they play the James Bond theme song,
Right.
and they have like the red button in the middle, like, oh, don't press that. And there's this, and we get introduced to Q, the quartermaster, which
and Penny.
Yeah, and Moneypenny. And, I like those things. Like, I don't mind those elements, but there's definitely a shift back towards quote unquote
campier Bond.
Yeah, classic,
stuff.
quote unquote classic Bond, essentially. And I'm just not a fan of it. Like, again, the big idea, the Silva's plot, the villain's plot is very reminiscent of like the Joker in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, Javier Bardem's entire character is like a Joker or like the Khan or something of like, I'm going to get caught because I want to get caught.
Right.
And then I'm going to break out and...
He set up this big, complicated scheme where his end game is just to basically kill M.
Yeah.
Dame Judi Dench's character. There's lots of opportunities for him to do that, and he doesn't take advantage of it.
No.
And then he's like, well, I want it to be personal, and I want you to feel the pain, and blah, blah, blah. But then at the end of the movie, he just kills her. And again, the plot is it's kind of an old school Bond-ish plot where it's this big, elaborate scheme that doesn't really amount to much.
Right.
Not to mention the Home Alone final act.
Yeah, with the cottage.
It's rough.
Plus, this also started I'm hoping not to be continued trend of the villain or the plot is tied to Bond's past.
Right.
In one way or another.
Yeah. In Skyfall, they specifically tie everything that's going on to James Bond's past, which I don't mind if you do that, but then, as we'll see in Spectre
does the same exact thing.
Right, they do it again. Everything doesn't have to be this personal vendetta. Like, James Bond can just go on a mission. It's okay.
Right. I think if you watch like the second trailer for Skyfall and the first trailer for Spectre, I think they have the same dialogue.
Yeah, it's like beat for beat, almost the same.
It's like, I remember you
right
from your past, Bond, and like that's it.
So then we get Spectre, which I really did not like.
No.
And the opening...
Except for I was going to say...
Right, the first like 10, 12 minutes, like the opening scene with the long take, all the...
Pretty much everything in Mexico.
Yeah, all the Day of the Dead stuff, like that's fantastic. Like I loved... While I was sitting in the theater watching that, I got really excited. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to like this movie. After 15 minutes, yeah, it gets rough. Man, it just, again, goes right back into the tropes of classic quote-unquote Bond.
Right.
It just, everything, I mean, down to like the car chase, and he ejects out of the car, and there's the parachute, and there's the plane chase where he's driving a plane that has its wings cut off.
There's the downhill snow chase, which is a Bond staple.
It's just, I don't know, man. Like,
he goes rogue, which is kind of another Bond staple.
Right. So the whole point of all of this, like, again, talking about James Bond a lot here, but the whole idea is that the first two films clearly establish this darker, more visceral tone.
Right.
And once we get to Skyfall, when things like, the Aston Martin pops up and then there's the classic Bond theme, or just the tropes of old James Bond movies, the gun that can only be used because his fingerprints are to it.
Right.
That sort of thing. Like a little more gadgety than the previous two movies have been. It almost feels, to me, it feels unearned. Like it feels like we're changing direction. We're kind of making a jaunting left turn out of nowhere. And I didn't like that. I don't think Skyfall is a bad movie.
No.
But it's not the movie that I was expecting after the first two.
The first two kind of feel like these original ideas. They feel new. They feel fresh, which is funny because Casino Royale is actually kind of a remake. And then when we get to Skyfall and Spectre, it just feels like one of the series.
Yeah, it
bleeds into the other ones, and then you can't tell where they're at anymore.
Yeah, it very much changed direction. Like the first two films kind of tell a continuous story. Like we get two parts of the same story, like Act 1 and Act 2 of a play almost. And then Skyfall doesn't really end the trilogy, and then Spectre comes around and kind of wants to tie everything together with the villain's plot, which again is really crazy and over the top again.
Yep.
And there's the twist where like he's Blofeld, but that doesn't really mean anything.
Right, and that I do have a big problem with that, and I don't want to go off on it too much, but I'm going to take this real quick. The reveal that he's Blofeld was seen a mile away, but like even when you see him 100% as Blofeld, his eyes missing, or not his eyes missing, but it's...
Yeah, he's got like the scar.
Yeah, and everything. When he looks like Blofeld from the Connery films.
Yeah, the Connery, and then goes into Roger Moore.
Yeah, so when you, like, his reveal is like, it's me, Blofeld. Oh, okay.
Right, it doesn't mean anything.
Like, that doesn't mean anything to anyone who has not seen those.
Right, so it doesn't mean anything to the characters in the movie because that name doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, he's not like...
The only reason that the name Blofeld means anything is from the old movies. So like fans of the old movies would recognize the name.
Oh, whoa!
But that doesn't have any context in this movie.
No, and it's the same issue that a movie that I think we both actually really liked, Star Trek Into Darkness, for the most part, it's got its problems. No, you're shaking your head. You don't like it.
No,
I think it's fine for the most part. I think the ending's garbage.
I don't dislike the Khan twist. I think that's fine.
I just don't like how it's done.
Correct.
When, again, saw a mile away, when Benedict Cumberbatch is revealed to be Khan, it's kind of like, what's your name? Khan. And the movie even like pauses and the music gets really dramatic, and for people like you and I, we're like, oh wow, it's Khan. Khan's a big deal. He's a big Star Trek staple. For anyone else who has no idea what Star Trek is or just like Star Trek '09, they don't know who he is.
Right.
Neither does Captain Kirk at that point, or Spock. Neither of them know who this guy is.
So, and these two examples have been beaten to death, like on the internet and so on and so forth. So we'll wrap this up quickly. But the Leonard Nimoy has to explicitly explain to his younger self, the younger Spock, Zachary Quinto, like why the name Khan means anything. So it's very, very sloppy.
And it's only put in there for fans of the series to go, oh,
right,
Khan. I remember that.
Right. So that's a good way to kind of bring the point home, is that a grand amount of fan service is being brought to two movies, but it doesn't serve in context to the story that the movie's telling.
No.
It doesn't have any meaning to the characters in the film. It only has meaning to the audience watching, and that's bad writing. That's terrible storytelling.
Yeah, you can't sit on this crutch of, don't worry, people will know this. You can't sit on that because some people won't.
Right. So we have, again...
And that makes the movie not solid. That film is no longer a solid film because it's missing a very dire piece of its story.
I agree. So, two movies where the fan service doesn't matter to anyone except the audience. And then we have, the James Bond franchise with Daniel Craig, where we start clearly with one tone in the first two movies, and then starting in the third, and then very much so in the fourth movie, kind of abandoning the tone we've established to go back to classic Bond. And I think they kind of wanted to get back to the classic Bond elements after Quantum didn't do so well.
Yeah.
But I just really feel like they betrayed what was going on.
Yeah, and like I said, I can see with Skyfall they were trying to do something because, it's 50 years of Bond, let's throw old Bond references in there.
Right. Again,
and that doesn't excuse Spectre.
Right. It's just all of the nostalgia value and all the fan service being performed in those two movies merely serves the audience. It doesn't serve the story or the characters within the story whatsoever.
Right.
The best thing that you can possibly do is infuse both of those. So the perfect example, I think, is Pulp Fiction. So you have John Travolta dancing with Uma Thurman, referencing a lot of different things. You're referencing, John Travolta dancing in Grease and in Saturday Night Fever. So you're making an observation about nostalgia and fan service, but it's being used in a way to tell the story at hand.
Yeah.
John Travolta dancing is kind of a joke, and you laugh, but you're really more entertained by the events.
He's dancing again, like he did in Grease.
Yeah, but it's also serving the story. Like, they're going to win this dance competition because they've had an awkward evening together. Like, it just works.
Right.
And that is not the case in the James Bond franchise.
Right. A couple other examples that I think are good fan service that doesn't take from the plot. One that comes to mind, and this is kind of funny because it's a piece of shit movie. Like, it's terrible. The Schumacher Batman films have two of, I think, the most cleverly placed references to previous Batman films in them. First one comes in, I think it's Batman Forever. Jim Carrey's in like the padded cell, and they're like, "Yeah, the psychiatrist is here to see you," and the psychiatrist is Tim Burton. Like, they don't go, "Hey, you look familiar. Are you a director?" Like, it's just Tim Burton, which is kind of a funny joke that if you know it, you catch it. The other one is from Batman and Robin. They have like the evidence room, or like the prized possession room, and like clearly hanging on like a coat hanger is Riddler's suit from Forever, and his hat's like up on a shelf.
Right.
It's a small thing. They don't draw attention to. It's just there that if you see it, you're kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Right. And I like the idea that you can have little things in the background. Like, you can do fan service. That's not a problem. But don't do fan service just for the sake of it being fan service. Either make it have some context, a la Pulp Fiction, or have it be a little Easter egg in the background, a la Batman and Robin, like you just described. I cannot believe I uttered that sentence, something positive about the movie Batman and Robin, but here we are.
It feels good.
It doesn't, but that's fine.
So our last film that has these same problems, suffers from these same problems, is the latest Star Wars film.
The Force Awakens.
Which we both walked away with kind of liking it. Like, it was better than we thought it would be.
My exact words when I walked out of the theater were, I didn't hate it.
Yeah, and I thought it was okay. I enjoyed it for the most part. Certain things bothered me, but it was no Phantom Menace.
It was no Phantom Menace. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen.
No.
But it's definitely not the best either.
Yeah, and it's got good parts, it's got bad parts, but one of the worst things that it does is it feels like it has to constantly reference the original trilogy. Big
time. Down to the structure of the plot.
Yes. Like, a lot of people have picked this apart constantly, saying that it's just A New Hope, round 2. Breaking it up from a young Jedi on a desert planet is sought out by an older, wiser person from the past, and they have to go and defeat a family member at a giant space planet.
Spoilers.
Spoilers. And then Han dies.
And we'll pick this whole film apart some other day.
Yeah.
Possibly. But there are a lot of instances in this movie where there's direct fan service or nostalgia value being added for little to no purpose.
Right.
And I think a big part of this is J.J. Abrams and the entire cast and crew of The Force Awakens, they obviously didn't want to repeat a Phantom Menace. They didn't want another movie that is universally hated by, the majority of Star Wars fans. They wanted to play it safe.
Yes.
And we essentially got a reboot/rehash of A New Hope.
Yeah.
And it's not the worst thing in the world. And again, I know this point has been made and this horse has been beaten to death. But man, it's the same damn movie.
There are a lot of different things in it. Like, the character of Finn is very different. Poe is different.
Yeah, I don't think the characters are exactly the same, but the journey that we take.
Yeah, and I mean, their kind of elements, their story is different than the ones that we have.
I agree.
The one that really sticks out is Rey, because Rey is Luke Skywalker.
And that doesn't even bother me. I don't mind those elements. I don't mind taking another character that's very much like Luke Skywalker, because Luke Skywalker is essentially just the hero's journey main character to a T. It's okay. I don't mind if you tell another hero's journey story. They literally used another fucking Death Star.
Yeah. And another trench.
Dude.
And another X-Wing flies in and destroys it and then flies out.
Dude. Again, I know you wanted to play it safe, but my biggest problem with The Force Awakens is I feel like because of the fear surrounding, hey, we don't want to make another Phantom Menace.
Right.
We're going to play it safe. We were denied another version of this movie.
Yeah.
That maybe took some chances, maybe took some risks, and maybe was something a little bit different and added something to the franchise and the mythos, whereas what we got was just A New Hope again. and again, it's another generation. I know there's kids out there who maybe haven't even seen the original movies. I get all that. Like,
Right.
I understand it's a big franchise and Disney wants to make its money because they spent billions of dollars to buy the franchise. I get it. But again, I just can't help but think we didn't get a new movie. We got what we already had.
Right. And I mean, for the most part, I usually don't like to judge a film based on previous installments or anything like that. I kind of like
agree.
to look at it as a single identity. But with these films, it's really hard to do that because this film's ending sucks. Because the ending is literally next time on Star Wars. Like, it does not end. It's a cliffhanger ending.
Sure. And Empire, does the same thing, obviously.
Right.
But I think in contrast, A New Hope tells a complete story, and Force Awakens doesn't.
And see, that's the biggest thing that you can get that kind of makes Empire a little bit higher, besides the fact that Empire is incredibly superior, is after we have this trilogy finished, would we be so willing to just watch Force Awakens? Like, I can just watch Empire and be fine and not have to watch Return. I have this feeling like, with how Force Awakens ends and with how I'm assuming the next one's going to start, it's going to kind of be like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the second and third movie of that.
Yeah.
You can't watch the second one
right.
without watching the third
It's
one.
two parts of the same movie, essentially.
Right, and I'm kind of wondering how this is going to be, and that is a problem that Hollywood's doing, and I can't have that idea that people are constantly like, oh, well, it's a trilogy. Oh, well, it's a trilogy. Don't worry about it. It's a trilogy. Don't worry about it. That doesn't fly.
Yeah,
You need to make a movie and then make a trilogy.
You can make the argument that you are making a trilogy and you're telling, like Lord of the Rings, for instance. Like that's 3 movies and it tells one story. Obviously, it's based on 3 books that are telling one story.
Right.
But at the same time, all 3 of the films have an arc to them. And I'm not saying The Force Awakens doesn't have an arc. I'm just saying that I think it asks a lot of questions and doesn't attempt to provide the answers in a way that's very, well, we'll figure things out later.
Right.
Down to, oh yeah, that's Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. Where did I get it? Well, I'll have to tell you some other time. Or, where did Rey come from? Don't know. We'll have to tell you later.
Right.
Like, there's
Next
a
time.
lot of that
Hey,
in the
here's
movie.
Luke. What does he sound like now? Nope. See you in 2 years.
Right. And again, so we're getting way off track. Force Awakens, long discussion is another day.
Yeah.
But the point is that the movie, in addition to just the overall plot, in my opinion, just being A New Hope over again,
Right.
Another fucking Death Star, you have things like...
Should we just go back and forth?
Yeah,
Name
fire
one each?
away. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, the chessboard.
Yeah.
There's one.
Oh man, I'm real nerdy. Hold on. Dejarik, I think is the name of the chess game.
Yeah.
It's something like that. And then same scene, the training remote that
Yes,
Luke used.
the droid.
They just like Finn picks it up and he's like, oh, what's it? And tosses it aside. And that's kind of a minor thing, actually. I don't mind that. But
Right.
the chess game, the Dejarik, that's just like, hey guys, remember this elbow from the
Yep.
first movie? It's a lot. Like,
Yep.
it's a little much. And I just feel like the movie's kind of plagued by that. And maybe these little things wouldn't be that big of a deal.
Oh, there's more. We gotta keep going.
Go for it.
What a hunk of junk.
Yeah, I mean, that little things.
That's kind of cutesy,
Yeah.
but it goes on the list after everything else shows up as well.
There's a lot of little things, like keep firing away if you've got them. But
The Mos Eisley scene is repeated in this.
yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. But again, I think all of these little problems are indicative of it's just the same movie
Right.
again.
Kylo Ren's name is Ben.
It all could, well, I mean, whatever. They can name him after Ben Kenobi. It's fine.
His name wasn't Ben, though. His name was Obi-Wan.
Not for a long time.
Do you think
long time.
Do you think R2's going to go talk to someone at one point and they'll be like, do you think they mean the old Kylo Ren?
I wonder if he means old Kylo Ren Kenobi.
Right.
Off topic.
Because it's really hard to talk about like what's fan service and what's just ripping off the old plot because, old mentor dying is kind of fan service but kind of ripping off the old plot.
But it's also just the hero's journey.
Like secret plans, MacGuffin being handed to a droid and the droid being chased by the Empire
Yep.
is kind of fan service but kind of also lazy writing.
I think that's just, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
black-clad hero strangles someone in the first 5 minutes of the movie.
It's fine. You're establishing your villain. Like, I
In
don't
the
know.
same way?
Yeah, I don't. It's tough, man. Like,
Yeah.
again, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. There's parts that I really, really like. Like, when Rey and Finn are running and they're like, oh, that hunk of junk, and the camera swings over, it's the Millennium Falcon. Like, I teared up in the theater. Like,
It's funny. Like, it's a funny, good joke.
I was like, that is the Millennium Falcon. Like,
Yeah.
and again, it got the cockles of my heart, got all warm and fuzzy. Like,
Right.
that was a huge nostalgia moment for me.
However, like, take yourself out of it. If I showed this to my nephew, who I think actually has seen Star Wars, so that wouldn't work. If he hadn't seen Star Wars and I showed this to him, it would just be, okay.
Yeah, but I think this opens up a broader discussion at this point where it's like, can you, for when you're watching Force Awakens, is it reasonable to assume that you've seen at least the original trilogy?
Right.
I think it is.
Well, then what about, what if some horribly misguided idiot watches the prequels first because it's 1, 2, and 3, and then Yoda goes, "Thanks, Chewbacca," and looks right at the camera and winks.
We're not gonna talk about the prequels on this podcast. We don't have that much time.
No.
The point is, I think it's a reasonable expectation to assume that the audience has seen at least the original trilogy before they watch The Force Awakens.
Right.
And you can play into that. Like, again, there is nostalgia value in the camera swinging over to the Millennium Falcon. Like, that doesn't bother me. And you know what? This is all subjective anyway. Like, it's just my opinion. It's just your opinion.
Yeah. I wish C-3PO would die. Like, I kind of want Kylo Ren to just wreck his shit.
I thought that was the best joke in the movie. You may not recognize me because of my red arm. Like, I thought that was the funniest part of the entire film.
Like, just go back to Attack of the Clones and have his head be put on a droid and then have it be destroyed.
No. Again, we're not talking about the prequels. But
we will one day.
Again, it's all subjective, and I can't say that, this specific thing is good and this specific thing is bad. Just in one humble podcaster's opinion, all of the little details don't really amount to much, or conversely, amount to too much, because the overall structure of the story, the film The Force Awakens, is pretty much exactly the same as A New Hope.
Right. And this is kind of funny that I'm thinking of this now. A movie that I don't mind and everyone hates, and I think you hate it, I think we've talked about this before, Crystal Skull, the fourth Indiana Jones film, is kind of in the same boat as Star Wars. It's
a little bit.
It's a film that's franchise ended in the 80s, and it got rebooted.
90s.
Did it end in the 90s?
Yeah.
Whatever, it's an 80s film. And it gets rebooted like 10, 15 years later, right? And it comes out, and it's pandered, and everyone hates it, and it's horrible, and blah, blah, blah. But it has a lot of, not the freaking Indiana Jones girl from the first one. Like, she does not count. She's not a good reference. But there are good references in that film. Like, when he's like, they're doing something in that warehouse, and they're like, hurry, we have to get after him. He has the crystal skull. It's very important. And, like, the camera, like, pans over, and there's a box that got knocked off, like, it's stacked, and it's, right, like, corners ripped off, and it's
the Ark of the Covenant.
It's the Ark of the Covenant from the first movie, just
right,
sitting there. No attention's drawn to it. It's just there. It's shown for a second.
Yeah.
And it's gone.
I mean, again, it's hard. The whole idea is it's hard. It's hard to specifically know where nostalgia and fan service belong, yeah, and knowing when it's too much. Like, I get it. It's a hard job, and I'm not saying that anyone's perfect at it. I'm not even saying that I have the right opinion. But I know what it feels like when things are just being thrown at me.
Right. Like, one of the best lines from that movie is when he's trying to swing onto the roof of the truck, and he, like, crashes in the windshield, and he's like, I thought I could do that better. And it's just like that's funny fan service.
Yeah. There's definitely a balance to be struck between things being funny and, yeah, things being overused. And it's a hard balance to strike, but there's definitely films that do it very well, and there's definitely films that do it very poorly. I don't even think necessarily that Crystal Skull's problem is the fan service and the nostalgia.
No, it's the plot.
Yeah, clearly. But I think...
and it's Harrison Ford's acting at times.
Or lack thereof.
Right.
And I think that...
and Mutt? No. Mutt's the kid. Who's the friend?
I don't know.
Butch Cassidy?
Butch Cassidy.
He guy's a piece of shit.
Ray Weinstone.
Yeah, who's
whatever
like,
his name is.
I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor. I'm a traitor.
I'm a triple, quadruple agent.
I don't give a shit anymore. I want the alien.
I mean, that's just sloppy writing. Like, that's the problem with that movie in general, is just a sloppy script. We're way off topic.
Yes.
But the point is,
forward.
again, it's a hard balance. Nostalgia, fan service, it's a hard balance to strike.
Right. If you're going to make a reference, make a reference. Don't make a reference where we go, oh, I remember that. Make a reference where it's clever.
Make it in service to the movie at hand.
Right. And
that's the key.
Sometimes the best way to do it is to put it in the background. With the internet nowadays, no, it's not going to go unnoticed. Like, someone's going to find it, someone's going to point it out, and we're all going to go, oh, that's really cool, they put that in there.
Right, movies are just full of Easter eggs now, especially with, like, Star Wars and Marvel and Disney, yeah.
We don't need a Marvel reference, and then they zoom in on the character, and then they, like, flash, like, an image of who he really is.
And
like,
then, wink.
Right, and then, ooh, it's Hydra Bob. Like, we don't need that. Like, that's, just show it, and we'll get it.
The point is when it comes to telling stories, movies, television shows, books, whatever,
right?
If you're going to take advantage of nostalgia and fan service, just use it in a way that helps you tell the story at hand.
Make sure it's beneficial.
Yeah, just make sure it benefits you in what you're doing now. Don't reference things just for the sake of referencing them.
Right, we remember them. That's why we're here watching the second one. That's why you're here listening to the second one, right?
Yeah, make it worth it and make it count. And make it fucking matter.
Star Wars sucks.
So that's our talk on nostalgia and fan service. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
It was very, like, emotionally based this time.
Yeah.
It was definitely more negative than positive.
And I think we could probably talk about this longer if we thought of more examples.
And we easily could.
Maybe we'll revisit it in the future.
I mean, we didn't touch any comic books. Because we could go and we could touch comic books for another whole hour on this.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We primarily focused on movies, but again, hopefully you enjoyed it. So if you did enjoy it, or if you can think of your own examples of nostalgia and fan service that either work or don't work, let us know. You can reach us on social media and Gmail at POP RANT RADIO, Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail. I said Gmail twice. Whatever, I'm rolling with it.
We have 2 Gmail accounts with the same name.
We'd like to thank Major for the lovely theme songs, both the intro and outro, as always, every week, man.
There is an outro coming.
You are the man. And other than that, do you have anything?
Nope, that's about it.
Cool. So, yeah, let us know what you guys think on social media, like we mentioned, or write me a letter. Pony Express. Send a raven.
Ponyta Express.
Dark Wings or Dark Words.
Or Darkwing Duck.
Darkwing Duck.
Mighty Ducks.
The Dark Knight. Knights of the Round Table.
Kid in King Arthur's Court.
Tabletop Gaming.
Fred Savage. I don't even know that's him.
It's not, but it might as well be. All right, everyone.
He aspired to be Fred Savage.
He aspired to be Fred Savage. That was rough.
He's on 2 Broke Girls, right? Woo!
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks.